Welcome everyone to the webinar presented by Hadrius and World Salon, the owner of Firm Integrity, Compliance After the Busy Work. My name is Lenny DeFranco, and I'm the editorial lead here at Hadrius. We are a Gentic compliance infrastructure company, and we're very excited to be presenting this session on the future of compliance, really what it can become and where this function is headed. Um, I'm going to first, I'd like to introduce our three panelists. If I could ask Mr. Ehrlich to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Robert Ehrlich, and I'm a global head of compliance for Citi Private Bank and Wealth at Work.
Ms. Graham.
Hi, my name is Colleen Graham. I am the Global Chief Legal Officer, Compliance and Risk Officer at AlTi Tiedemann Global, Wealth and Asset Management.
And Mr. Molinari.
Hello, everybody. I'm Robert Molinari, the Chief Regulatory Affairs Officer and RIA Chief Compliance Officer of Commonwealth Financial Network.
Great, thank you very much. So I'm going to just spend a few minutes setting the table for the discussion, and then I'd like to jump into the actual questions. This is certainly supposed to be a discussion, so please feel free to just jump in if anyone has any insights. I'd like to do as little talking as possible, but I will set the agenda now. So essentially, what we're talking about today is the future of compliance. So the company that I work for, we sell agentic compliance infrastructure, and what this basically means is this is software that is built from first principles to use AI to help compliance do their work better. A lot of compliance work is very repetitive. It's something that involves a lot of reading, a lot of flagging things, a lot of reaching out to people, and these are all things that AI can massively scale and actually do better in a lot of ways than humans do. And then, of course, it serves all of this up for human review. This is a job function that it is traditionally been about catching up, right? And it's about a checking list of things to do. And the question that I'm posing today is what happens if in the future, let's say 10 years from now, I mean, none of this is something that is going to happen overnight. So we're thinking more theoretically. What is the future of compliance if there was, let's say, double the amount of time you had? If there was so much time savings that this sort of catch up mode that compliance officers are constantly in were to invert. And I think the question that poses is what is the busy work keeping compliance from doing? There's this thing that happens with automation where it tends to reveal the core of work. So we see this with coding. Now that, AI can write code. We still need developers, but it changes the nature of the work into more architecture than just, typing code. And so the question that I have for this group is what is the core of compliance that's going to be uncovered by being able to handle a lot of the stuff that used to take up most of our time? One idea that I'm really energized by is this idea that I want to pitch to you guys called the owner of firm integrity. Basically, the idea of this is that the same way that the SEC, for example, is the owner of systemic integrity, I'm wondering if the compliance office of the future, if it remains a distinct office, which is one of the questions I have, I think one of the roles it can take on is being this office in charge of firm health. Basically, the way that a regulator sets standards, interprets standards, it monitors the market, and it has enforcement authority. It doesn't actually sit inside of firms. It audits them, and it has prosecutorial discretion and things like that. And I'm wondering if the compliance office, if it becomes a strategic partner, could basically be the same kind of thing, sharing firm integrity. So it would define protocols. It would also monitor the firm with the help of, agents, AI agents, that is. And of course, it doesn't have, you can't throw someone in jail as the internal, although you might want to. as the internal sitting compliance officer, but you do have the ability to investigate and exercise judgment, and of course, stress test your controls and things like that. And so that's where the name of this session comes from, is that I think this is a really interesting idea, but really this is the question I want to pose to you. Do you think compliance will continue to exist as a discrete office? Do you think something like this is in the future? One thing I wanted to say off the bat, though, is that I think it's very clear that what we're not talking about when we talk about AI and compliance is less compliance. We've actually already seen that uh, jobs that are actually more exposed to AI grow in headcount. I mean, you look at on this chart I grabbed from an Indeed report, like up in the right corner of software development. This is something that they thought was going to be gone. It was like, what are engineers going to do from now on? But it turns out there's more code in the world, and so there's more need for people that knows how it works. Um, Radiologists is another really good example. There was like so many prognostications that we're not going to need radiologists anymore, and actually it's the fastest growing discipline in medicine right now. And so AI basically, as someone who like basically works in the AI industry, if you strip away the rhetoric of, all these terror stories, like it is a tool. It's a quantum leap forward for automation, but it is a tool. And nowhere is that more known than in compliance, where it's like you would not trust a robot to make judgments, and so you are going to need to govern reps that are using AI to send out marketing emails and things like that. So the burden is increasing, and the tools available to compliance are increasing. And I think this means that compliance is going to become more important. We see this report from the Bank Policy Institute. What these charts are is basically uh, from 2016 to 23 changes in compliance, full-time employees, the amount of regulatory complexity or the degree of regulatory complexity has increased and will certainly continue to increase the more AI requires governance. So the point of these is that when we talk about AI in compliance, it's like my prediction as of now, at least, is that I think the function is going to get more important. I think there will probably be more people in the department, even as each individual compliance department worker and each CCO is able to do more. So with that, I want to get into the session. And again, my core question is what happens when the office catches up. So this hints at what is the core work of compliance? What would your oversight look like? What work would you take on if you had 95% more time? Just to throw out like a sci-fi number. Um, and what role should compliance play in being a business partner to leadership? And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'd like to address the first question to Ms. Graham. So as someone who spans the sort of legal and compliance world, I'm wondering if you could tell me what you think is the core job of compliance specifically as distinct from legal.
Yeah, sure. And listen, I'll focus primarily on legal, but sorry, I'm on a panel. Sorry, my boss. Um, so I'll focus on legal and compliance together because I do think the answer is sort of the same. AI is changing the way legal compliance and risk does work. And I think the future compliance officer or the future chief legal officer or the future chief risk officer is going to look different than it is today based on that automation. And I'd say as automation clears the routine work in the right organization, and I think that is important in the right organization, compliance can help build the firm's integrity. And Lenny, you had asked about culture, reputation, counterparty trust, I think across all of those disciplines. So look, AI has already, for me anyway, changed the way I work. So we can review contracts and draft policies in minutes. We can stay abreast of regulatory changes. We can conduct investigations, track remediation items in a fraction of the time than it used to take for us. But it does open that great question. So what does it mean for our career? What does it mean for our profession? And I actually think that AI is the best thing that's happened to our profession. And I'll tell you why I think that. I think AI should elevate, not diminish, the strategic importance of compliance. We now have time to understand the business. We have time to understand the economics. We can be a partner to the business. And we can shift from being sort of a cop on the beat and finding problems to turning into sort of, that partner to help shape the institution's character and earn the trust of the key stakeholders. So rather than spending most of our day reviewing alerts, like as a compliance professional, reviewing alerts or checking boxes, we can become a partner. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of where I think that kind of, I've seen even now more and more come into play. Advising senior executives on ethical and reputational risks, assessing the cultural implications of strategic decisions, ensuring employees feel comfortable escalating. Like, those aren't things that AI can do. And I think, there are other things that AI can't detect that we can look for in our profession now that the routine stuff is a little out of the way or done more efficiently. Shifts in employee behavior, shifts in leadership tone, emerging ethical concerns. All of those things aren't going to be picked up by AI, but you would have professionals that actually have more time to spend, looking at the culture and the integrity of the firm. I would say we can now make sure that the firm is acting transparently, treating customers fairly, detecting emerging risks, all immediate sort of business value add, because the role is going to become less operational, more advisory. And I would add, trust is a competitive asset for a firm. Banks with strong compliance culture enjoy stronger client relationships, easier partnerships, lower regulatory scrutiny, and a lower cost of doing business. And the last thing I'd say on it, Lenny, you mentioned software development, you mentioned radiology. I'll give you another one. I think AI will have the same impact on legal and compliance as spreadsheets had for accounting. So routine work becomes dramatically faster, but experienced professionals remain essential for interpreting complex issues, exercising judgment, making decisions that regulators and clients expect humans to own, not AI. So we would add measurable value to the business by helping to shape the firm's culture and reputation.
Thank you. Yeah, there's that famous example. I love the spreadsheet analogy. There's that famous example of, if you look at a room full of actuaries with their slide rules in the 50s, it's like each one of those people is basically a cell of a spreadsheet, and the building was essentially the whole, the spreadsheet. And now, if you took that away from those people, you'd be like, well, what are they going to do? But actually, it turns out the thing that is hired for is the expertise. It's the larger thinking. So certainly, I think we probably all agree that automation is a tool that's going to make the function more powerful. I'm wondering, Mr. Ehrlich, if you could speak. You also have a legal background. Do you see any particular inherent work of compliance that you think will stay as a distinct compliance department, not handled by legal oversight?
Yeah, and I'll start with the disclaimer that all my comments are my own and not of my employer. But with that sort of out of the way, yeah, I think, and I might be getting ahead of some of our future questions, but the way I think about AI is there are really three different pillars of how it sort of could work in compliance. You have your own personal productivity, right? Summarize for me, draft for me, right? Personal productivity. You then have the functions that are doing repetitive tasks and the automation side, right? And that's what everybody talks about, right? And so could be a testing function, a surveillance type function, and what happens there. And then the third, which we'll talk about a little later, is also our sort of role on helping the business in their own sort of way. And I think what sort of will always happen is we will evolve along with the business as they evolve, right? Because we won't be the only function implementing AI. Everybody across a firm will be implementing AI. And so as that happens, volumes increase, right? And so we now have to be able to keep up with volumes. And they're doing their increase of volumes using AI, right? And so if they are not increasing people at an exponential rate that you used to be able to, because they've automated processes, well, we're still going to need to cover their increase in a similar type way. And so you sort of have to strike that right balance of how we use it, how they use it, how we keep up with their fast pace. And so I don't see I don't see any of it like it's going to change dramatically how we work, but I don't think it's going to necessarily change like the massive size of the department because we may just have to move around a few chairs that like, oh, this part of testing is now automated, but now we're actually testing 30 more things. So now you can redeploy and look at something else, right? And so I think we're still going to be extremely like value add and like Colleen was saying, like we're going to be have to be using a lot of our sort of thinking hats for those higher value tasks, right? Like in that's where I think we'll always come into play.
Thank you. Mr. Molinari, now to you. So I guess the question is, do you think that this value add is going to be something that compliance offers is going to be something that is essentially new that it's not doing now, or do you think it's going to be uh, essentially more of the same at a larger scale?
I think it will be new. I mean, at my firm, I wear two hats, and one's very reactive, and that's kind of the chief compliance officer role, and the other one is more proactive, and that's in the regulatory affairs role that I play. So I'll start by saying a misconception about AI and compliance is that the primary value is in reducing headcount. A more profound impact is that it's going to allow compliance professionals to spend less time answering questions and more time anticipating. As you know, a significant portion of the compliance team's work has historically been very reactive. We review communications, approve advertising, resolve exceptions, answer advisor questions, and respond to regulatory inquiries. Those activities are necessary, but they're fundamentally driven by somebody else's agenda. And this is where regulatory affairs is different. So regulatory affairs is about looking towards the horizon, identifying emerging risks, understanding where regulators are heading, recognizing the industry trends before they become exam priorities, and helping business leaders make decisions today that will hold up under scrutiny in the future. So if automation successfully takes over a significant portion of this reactive queue, I think compliance's future becomes increasingly concentrated and more anticipatory work.
Exactly. So that then brings up this idea of the owner of firm integrity. You're referring to it as essentially doing regulatory affairs. Can you maybe talk about what exactly what is a unique insight that the compliance department has in doing that proactive work that you don't think could come from another part of the company?
Well, a lot of it is we have purview into almost everything at the firm, where our firm has multifaceted departments. We've got wealth management. They typically stay in wealth management. We have a trading arm. We've got operations, whereas compliance kind of does the overlay of almost everything. And so having that purview helps a lot. And being able to help with those predictive analytics and help the business leaders make sound decisions today that are going to stand the test of time, that really helps. And so what does that really require? So I'd say first, it requires a shift in the mindset of compliance professionals. So we're moving from more monitoring to predicting. So a traditional compliance program is very good at detecting known issues. Build surveillance systems around risks that have already been identified. Whereas anticipatory compliance requires scanning for risks that don't yet fit into a control framework. That means paying attention to, like I said before, the enforcement trends, exam priorities, emerging technologies, but also changes in our consumer behaviors. AI can really help synthesize enormous amounts of information, but humans still matter because they have to determine what that all means at the end of the day and apply it to the business. And so that kind of leads me to my second point. It requires a much stronger partnership with the business that we provide the oversight for. So the most valuable compliance function in the future won't be one that shows up after a product is designed. It will really be one that's sitting at the table when the product is being conceived. So by the time a compliance issue appears in a surveillance report, the strategic decisions have already been made. So this anticipatory compliance means getting involved earlier and help shape those outcomes rather than evaluating them after the fact. And if you want me to continue, that kind of leads into where I really think the role of the compliance professional in the future will add the most value. And that really revolves around judgment. And I think judgment, this is really where the human element remains indispensable. AI can identify patterns, summarize regulations, compare policies, uncover potential risks. What it cannot do is determine the firm's appetite for risk. It cannot decide how to balance innovation against customer protection, or whether a technically permissible action is nevertheless inconsistent with our firm's values or culture. These are judgment decisions, and I believe strongly that judgment remains human.
Absolutely. Colleen, how do you think compliance goes about winning that level of partnerships so that we can begin undertaking what Robert's calling anticipatory, I love that term, anticipatory compliance.
Yeah. I mean, the way I feel very strongly that you need kind of to do two things. You need to be, first of all, at the right organization, right? So there needs to be a fundamental respect for compliance and the work that's done, because some of it's, some of it is routine, whether it's more efficient now through AI or not. They don't always want the answer. So I think you need to be at a firm that respects and appreciates the value and actually, frankly, does and welcomes the answer and the solutions that come along with it. So I think, number one, it's important that there is a culture of compliance at the organization in order to become more of a strategic partner as things get more efficient. I'd say the other thing is it's really important, and we all try very hard to sort of train our teams, I think, to become partners to the business, understanding the economics, understanding what the business person would like to accomplish through what they're asking you to advise on, and to be solutions oriented. That doesn't mean compromising to the point where someone is non-compliant, but having them understand what it means to do good business. And I think if you sort of combine that, if you're in the right organization and you are a partner, the sort of shift as AI and automation kind of makes things more routine into more of a strategy role becomes really important. And that's the way to do it. And I would say this, the last thing I'd say of this is in my last couple of roles, I've been at, a couple of banks over the last couple of years. It's really important to me that compliance, or legal, but compliance has a role and a seat at the table with the most senior folks. And to me, that's not because, it's a power thing, but that is because it's evidence of the fact that they want the advice and they want compliance at the table because they are very interested in doing good business. And I think that is really important.
Colleen, you brought up something that triggered something in my head. And when you said culture of compliance, one of the things that came to mind is, again, why the people are so important. So as we know, when regulators examine the firm, they're not simply assessing whether we have controls or not. They're evaluating whether the leadership exercised reasonable judgment. So they really want to know what management knew, when they knew it, what alternatives were considered, and why decisions were made. So those types of explanations are still going to require people. You can't do that with algorithms.
Mr. Ehrlich, what insights do you think the compliance department could offer that would start to gain that partnership that Colleen's talking about?
Yes, so I think being at that table, you then have kind of insights across the entire firm, right? And you have to develop partnerships with both the business and as well as the other control functions, right? It's very hard to do compliance risk in a silo without like operational risk, as an example. And so all those partnerships together, you kind of have like a unique insight into the things happening across the firm. And then you then can give that recommendation. Oh, you want to go left, left, right? Maybe you should go left, right? Like, and then really give that sort of like guidance on how to the thing that we were talking about earlier about being in the product early design, being there early to sort of give that advice. Now, the other thing, and this is where AI will be a nice enabler also, is we then can, when you're in that room, you can enable the building of the controls, the monitoring, and the output we need for compliance as part of that whole build process. So should never think about compliance as like its own side process, right? It should all be embedded in overall the build. If we're building a trading platform, well, all your compliance rules need to be in the trading platform, all the monitoring and testing that you need, pre, post trade, like all that has to be all embedded into like one design. If you build them in silos and we're like, no, we're going to build an AI system for compliance over here and an AI system for the business and how they develop over here, there's going to be some sort of break and we're going to miss something. And so really that partnership, that level of engagement with the business and the senior leaders really is like the value add that we can bring to the table to then reduce our compliance risk. I think like that's like the part where we keep talking about how compliance personnel are still going to be needed in the future. This is like a prime example of like something that's always going to have to exist. That human in the loop is always going to be in a design, right? So we might have coders that can code faster and products that can launch in a few months instead of years, right? But we're still going to need the people with the expertise to then guide the build. And if we do it right in the right partnership, end to end, it'll be a better result for everybody, including all our external stakeholders, clients, regulators, and the like.
And Robert, you made me think of something too. Like I do feel like communication is key on that partnership, right? So now if automation makes things more efficient, you can spend more time communicating. I mean, I would say the most successful compliance people that I know are the folks that are able to articulate it in such a way that the person who's the partner to them, the business people, kind of would come to the same conclusion. You actually don't need to advise them or advise them not to. You actually help them understand it, and they have the same common goal. You know, it's kind of like, maybe I shouldn't say this, but it's kind of like, you know, with my husband, the way I get him to do something is I get him to realize that he wants to do that, and that he wants to sort of clean up the backyard or take the garbage out. So getting people to sort of to the same place just through good communication and partnership and, you know, working together on something, whether it's product design or otherwise.
And that's why us staying close to like the latest is extremely helpful. Like I think about how already the shift, right? Like it used to be a problem arose, legal and compliance may have gotten together. You then needed an outside counsel call. Like there was all these steps to reach the conclusion. Now business already has typed it into AI, the problem, and they already have what the AI said. And then legal and compliance, same thing. And then outside counsel, if we did engage them now, same thing. But we may have gotten an answer that was like a needle in a haystack, so to speak, much quicker, an exemption to something that would have normally required somebody who had that expertise and solely focused on that topic for the past 30 years, now is easily accessible. So our ability to respond to inquiries, right, and work across the functions is also much quicker, and that's like a change like we already see.
I want to throw this question to the group at large. What would you do if you had double the time? If you had double the bandwidth, what work do you think a year from now your department would be taking on?
I can start. I think it's strategic work, right? So I think it's, you know, working with we talked about being at the table in a product design, actually getting into it with the business from a strategic perspective. And I kind of find it interesting because if you look at sort of how legal and compliance and even the sort of titles that you sometimes get now as chief legal officer versus, you know, general counsel, it's because there's a strategic element to it. So I do think there is a lot more that we could add with more time from a strategic perspective. So that's how I kind of see it evolving, and I love it.
Yeah, I agree. I say the future model with that double capacity, and I'm not sure that will ever happen, but we can only wish. is going to allow compliance to be involved in things that I think they need to be in every day. And that's product governance, technology governance, strategic planning, and really importantly, change management, not as a reviewer, but as a participant. To me, that's a big difference because as you know, in compliance, um, we're often accountable for outcomes that we've had very limited influence in creating. And so having that ability to shape those decisions instead of just review the decisions will be fantastic going forward. And with that excess time, I think we've already got the respect of our peers. We just needed the capacity to be present in those rooms.
And I also think,
sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Robert.
I also think like most programs are risk-based approaches. So we would continue going down the list as we were able to clear some of the priorities, right? And continue to tackle some of the other items because there's definitely definitely no shortage of work.
And I was just going to add, and I agree completely, but I was going to add, one of the sort of examples of sort of things that we've started to do in my group that we didn't always necessarily have time to do. For example, we're a public company, so we have earnings calls where the CEO may have a town hall, and we have an opportunity to sort of strategically help shape that dialogue and what the script is and making sure that the tone is right and the culture of compliance. And there wasn't always time to do that. So I think that is, not only more fun, but really value add.
So I think one of the things that's interesting about the idea of compliance as strategic partner is that it's not something we've really had a lot of precedent for seeing what they're going to try to optimize for. In other words, if a revenue generating function is, which is always going to be a partner in strategy setting, well, we know what they want. They want to maximize revenue. That's what their object is. If it's a product-led organization, they're going to be ensuring that all the business decisions drive towards capturing market share, whatever that is. Compliance is something that I don't know that we have an easy proxy for imagining what that would be, because again, it has always been such a catch-up thing, and it's always it's satisfying something external. So what does this group think would be the optimization goal of a compliance that's actually able to set strategy?
Again, kind of tying in what we've already covered. So I'd see the compliance officer of the future is going to spend less time doing the fact finding and more time helping the overall organization navigate ambiguity and navigate those emerging risks and those strategic trade-offs, which in my opinion might be the ultimately be the most valuable role compliance has ever played in the organization. So the future is not just answering regulator questions or answering yes or no questions to our business partners. It's really identifying questions that the industry hasn't even started asking yet and helping our senior leadership peers be prepared for them before those questions even come forward.
And I would add, so I completely agree. And I would add to that, I would say it across the sort of three, culture, helping shape the behavior at the organization. That's totally value add. Reputation, managing the sort of trust premium. How do we treat customers? Are we governing AI responsibly? All of those things. And lastly, and I think really importantly, that the strategic differentiator of the counterparty trust, because as I said earlier, trust becomes a competitive asset. So I do think we can be more competitive in the market if we have stronger compliance culture because we have better client relationships or lower regulatory scrutiny, things like that, I think really add value.
Yeah, I love that answer. And of course, we know that in every way, trust has never been at more of a premium, and it really is. I mean, compliance has always been a guarantor of reputation, but it's more important now than ever. Okay, so we mentioned a little bit of the regulatory interface. Um, we have a few minutes left. I'd like to close by asking, so in a world in which there is this more strategic function, what would you like the regulatory interface to be? What do you think would be the proper type of audit and engagement that a regulator would have with you? Do you think they should be asking the same questions, or do you think they should be coming in essentially auditing your strategy setting? What would you guys like to see from a legal perspective?
Well, I could start with I'd like to have the same tools they use, right? Like so if we know they're looking at a particular thing in a particular way, us having the ability to be able to do the same thing live, right? Like helps and address, right? Because if you think about how like SEC audits have evolved, right? A lot of firms engage consulting firms for external auditors, right? Like for a period of time to like test themselves because there could be a gap period between last audit and next audit. And so exam readiness always has been like a key topic in like in large firms, registered investment advisors. And so in the AI world, it's going to be the same. And the difference will be both us and the regulators will have the ability to look at larger bodies of data and look for those nuances a lot easier, right? Like across the board. And so I think it's very important that we both are sort of using similar tools and have the ability to do that. And that's part of this design that I was talking about earlier when we're building products and platforms and systems, embedding a lot of that in there. And so that we're looking at things that regulators care about, our clients care about, what the rules say, like as it happens, and not having to think about it 2 years, 3 years down the line.
And I completely agree with that. Everything that Robert just said, I would add to it. I would like to see more time and opportunity to become sort of, I have to be careful about saying partners to the regulators because, of course, it's an independent function and they have to be independent. But at the same time, I do think there's a lot more time we could spend together, and that helps to build the trust, frankly. And some of that's about, having some opportunity with the regulators so that we can educate each other. Some of the stuff Robert mentioned on sort of them educating us, but also we can educate them on sort of how we see things. What are we seeing? What are we trying to drive to in the business? And I think with automation and more free time, you can actually really build that relationship with the regulators. And I think that is absolutely powerful.
Yeah, I agree. And Robert, you nailed it. I mean, how many hours do we waste at the beginning of every exam when they ask a question, we're not sure why they asked it because they're seeing a different data set than we're seeing, and then they finally get comfortable enough to explain it to us, and then we show them what we have, and we kind of have to translate everything together, and just a lot of time wasted. I will say that over the years, I've been doing the regulatory requests for about 2 decades now, and I do feel like over the years there has been a convergence of respect where folks have come to it's less adversarial, where people are coming to the table with more of an open mind, which is very encouraging, whether that's SEC, FINRA, or even the states, where they want to truly understand the why behind something. And that goes both ways. We want to understand why they're asking for certain things. Obviously, if it's in the exam priorities, that kind of paints its own picture. We know why. But if something comes out of left field, we want to understand where'd you get that? Where are you seeing that? Should we enhance our controls if that's important? Did we miss something? Is there a gap there? And I feel like we're getting a mutual respect as the years have gone on. Now, obviously, individuals come into play, and you have some people that are easier to work with, and some people that could be more difficult to work with. But that's just personalities.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking that the biggest change would be going from like bad guy to good guy. It's like going from, I like the idea that Colleen mentioned earlier, going from kind of a traffic cop to something more elevated, maybe a legislator, or, if not a DA or I don't know, some equivalent. But yes, and understanding around the firm, like why you're doing it, hopefully would lead to less retaliation, right? And a brighter future for the entire department. Um, we're at time now. I really appreciate this panel's time. I'd like to wrap it up there. I think this has been a really good discussion. Let me just throw it out to each of you. Any last words about what you hope this department becomes in a future of greater agentic bandwidth?
I would say
Yeah.
I just hope we become the sort of profession that is welcomed at every table and the partner that every senior business person wants because they feel like they can't live without us, without us sitting next to them.
Yeah, my wish is that compliance ceases to be the function that just finds issues and increasingly be the function that helps organizations avoid creating them in the first place. And with regard to automation, how that will impact our jobs, I would say the most automation resistant part, like I said before, is that exercising judgment under uncertainty. I think that's where we as human beings will remain essential.
Yeah, and I think the thing that comes to mind is opportunity, right? There is immense opportunity, both our work, business work, to really engage here. And if people are a little afraid, what I always tell them is use it in your personal life and just instead of going to Google, try it. And once you get in on it, you'll start connecting the dots and it'll all start making a ton of sense to you. And so I think there is immense opportunity as people embrace it to really change the way our firms and the industry sort of operate.
You're referring to AI in general, right?
AI in general.
Gotcha. Yeah, and one of the things that we like to emphasize here is that, because AI can mean a lot of different things, and there's generative AI that, there's the thing making up facts, and the AI that is going to be most, well, first of all, working with it directly helps you realize what it can't do, which is actually quite a lot. But then also specifically in the compliance function, like what Hadria sells is much more deterministic. It's basically taking that computational power and putting it in specific places so that it's like transparent and leaves an audit trail and things like that, so you know what it's thinking. And yeah. Anyway, this has been a great discussion. I really appreciate the time from each of you, Robert Molinari, Robert Ehrlich, and Colleen Graham. Thank you, folks, for joining me, and we will hopefully continue this discussion going forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Lenny. Thank you to the
Thank you.
Roberts.